local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. We are at the Irish Cultural Center in West Utica. There's 5 streets that come together down here, and that's where the tavern downstairs gets its name, the 5 Points. Our guest is Al Sisti. Al is a big part of what goes on down there. He's former Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. He's a very active volunteer here, doing a lot of research about Irish culture in the area. And he's also with the Blarney Rebel Band. How'd the Blarney, first of all, thanks for letting us come in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How'd the Blarney Rebel Band get its name?
Well, after we got sued for using a name that someone already had, we decided let's pick something that no one else possibly could have. And so it started with Blarney Rebel, and then we said, why not Blarney Rebel?
Uh-huh.
And it turns out there is a radio station called Blarney Rebel in Cupertino, California. So, but they haven't sued us yet,
Yeah.
so we're okay still.
Yeah. So you're still playing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw your group, if my memory is correct, I think it is, you were the warm-up act at the Stanley for, what's the name of that group?
The Elders
No.
and Hair of the Dog.
No. This was a pretty big band, national band. They're giving a concert down at the Stanley. This was a few years ago, and it'll come to me.
All right.
Hopefully before the end of the show.
Hopefully not at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, oftentimes that's when it happens.
Yeah.
This is a very appropriate place for this center and for the bar and restaurant downstairs. We are sitting on what used to be a church.
We are on the exact site of the original St. Patrick's Church that was built in, 1850 by a burgeoning Irish population. We are essentially in the front of the church here. So it faced out on Columbia Street, went back that way, and it stood vacant from 1968 when it was torn down after a diocese consolidation with St. Joseph's. And when the Great American Irish Festival, the funding arm for an Irish Cultural Center, a Hibernian Hall, when we were looking for a place either to buy an existing building or rent or build, this came up and we said, this is karma. This, we have to have this. This is hallowed ground. And so we did. We went to the City Hall and put in a proposal. They accepted it.
And so this was a vacant lot when...
Yeah, I guess the plan was in 68, the building was actually closed in 1966. The last Mass was said in 66. It was torn down in 68 with the plan to build a firehouse here. And that never happened. That fell through, so.
It's interesting that right across the street you've got a Catholic church. Here you had a Catholic church. I guess that talks about those times when you could support 2 Catholic churches right across the street from one another.
Right, and so they were alike in that they were Catholic churches, but that St. Joseph's was more German and St. Patrick's is more Irish, and then there was another church, St. George's, just down the street. Yeah, different times for sure.
Yeah. The outside on the, would be the northwest corner of the property, there's stones. Those
stones are the original foundation of, I'm assuming, both churches. The first church was built in 1850. It burned down in November of 1889. It was rebuilt in 1894, 1895. And when they dug up this empty lot in 2007, something like that, they found all these foundation stones below. So they crated them all up and put them off on the side while they were doing all the digging up. And I'm assuming it has to be the same church, because the original church, because yes, the church burned down, but the rocks wouldn't have, and they wouldn't have moved them. And I'm assuming they rebuilt the church on the original foundations.
Mm-hmm. And the building is really 2 parts, is it not, Al? I mean, downstairs and then upstairs.
right down to legally, two parts. The pub and the event center are part of a for-profit organization that is wholly owned by the Irish Cultural Center, Irish Cultural and Historical Center of the Mohawk Valley, which is a 501c3. So yeah, the upstairs is essentially a museum and presentation space for our programs. There's a couple conference rooms. By the way, they are for rent and available for other people to come in and use. Office space also. And downstairs, the beautiful Five Points Pub and an event space that can seat up to 250 people for weddings, dinners, stuff like that.
The, if I recall correctly, and I'm sure I do, the pub was made in Ireland.
It was made in Dublin by the Irish Pub Company. Nice job, man. And they've made probably hundreds of them. It was made entirely in a shop, set up, then disassembled, and shipped here in 3 containers, and then rebuilt here. And the Sullivan brothers put it all together and did all the other stuff, molding, painting, tiles, this other stuff needed to be done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's spectacular. You won't see another one. You certainly won't see another pub like this within 90, 120 miles.
The people probably have asked you this question before. I have. How did a guy by the name of Sisti get so involved in Irish things?
Well, I blame half my heritage on my mom, who was full-blooded Irish, Patty Ann McBride. I blame a lot of it on my brother Mark, who once he saw Vince Colgan playing, he fell in love with Irish music.
And Vince Colgan, yeah.
Yeah, and then he taught us all more about the heritage than we actually knew. So,
What a shame that Vince Colgan, for those who don't know Vince Colgan, he was he worked for ARC, I think, in his later life, and a great Irish musician. He used to play right down the street
Sure.
at a bar called Mayo Gate, and he'd sing all those Irish songs down there.
Yep.
And if you wanted a beer, you better hope you didn't want one while somebody was performing, because he didn't like to serve beers while somebody was performing.
it's a good rule.
Johnny Oakes.
Yep.
Okay. The
We just mentioned several grand marshals there too, didn't we?
yeah.
Yourself included.
Well, yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Long time ago, 1992. But we've got a list somewhere. I'm sure there's a list here.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to be part of one of the upcoming exhibits. Partly because the Great American Irish Festival Incorporated took over the running of the parade after I think Heron Cable, Heron Caro's had it for a while, and then some other organizations, but still going strong.
The Rainbow Sportsman's Club had it for a while, Heron Cable. When we come back, we'll talk about the first Grand Marshal of Utica St. Patrick's Day Parade. Al Sisti is our guest. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Al Sisti is our guest. Al McBride Sisti, I guess I could say, right?
Yep.
And we're talking about Irish things. We were at the Irish Cultural Center at the corner of Varick and Columbia and a bunch of other streets, right across the street from St. Joseph's, St. Patrick's Church. The name of the band we were trying to think of, we came up together.
Marshall Tucker Band, yeah.
Marshall Tucker Band. And how long ago was that? 3 years, 4 years?
Oh, way
More
longer,
than
yeah.
All right.
Some things we don't even measure in years.
Okay. Anyway, we were talking about St. Patrick's Day Parade. You were Grand Marshal 2 years ago.
Correct. The snowstorm that didn't involve Dolly Parton, that was my year.
Yeah, it snowed pretty good that day,
Yes, it
didn't it?
did.
Yeah, yeah, but it went off. The very first, of course, you had the original St. Patrick's Day parade, then it went away, and then it came back, and we can trace that back to Johnny Oakes and Vin Carew. But the first St. Patrick's Day parade, I forget the date, but
1824.
1824.
Yeah, John Devereux, the Irish pioneer, the preeminent Irish citizen Utica's ever seen. He started a St. Patrick's Day dinner at the Baggs Hotel, and then a parade proceeded, and so he was the first Grand Marshal, and he kept that title and duty for, till he died in 1848. So he was, I think it was Moses Bagg quoted that he used to proudly walk down the street with a shamrock from the old sod in his buttonhole.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, and he paid for everything. I mean, he took care of the expenses. I don't know what the expenses were, but he took care of that.
He did. And interestingly enough, there was an article, so that was 1824. There's an article in the Observer, I don't think it was Observer Dispatch then, but the Utica Observer.
That was the Observer
in 1879, where Michael McQuaid and one other guy were still alive that were at that dinner. And someone interviewed them, and they gave all the particulars of what happened that first day and who was in attendance. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. John Devereux, and we'll talk about his brother in a minute, but John Devereux and Nicholas, his brother, were very religious people. It was at John Devereux's house that there was no Catholic church here, but it was at his house on let's see, that'd be the northeast corner of 2nd and Broad Street, a vacant lot today.
Well, it's a parking lot for J.M. Dorr, but yeah, it used to be John Devereux's mansion until the Lowry brothers took it over after he died, after their place burned down in 1867, and then the city tore it down in the 70s. So. But there's no marker of that was his home.
Yeah.
There is a boulder, like you were alluding to, with a plaque on there that says the first Catholic Mass in Utica was said on that spot.
We together were over at historic St. John's Church not too long ago, and Father Tom Servatius kind of surprised me. I don't know if he surprised you with a...
Stunned.
Yeah.
Stunned.
Talk about that, what he brought down to show us.
Yeah, well, we had heard through the grapevine that they were in possession of the original altar that they used to perform the first Mass, and he said, I can bring it down for you. And we're like, altars are like marble and 7 feet long or whatever. And he brought down a table. It couldn't have been more than 2 by 3 feet, if that, in area, and this tall. But again, they didn't have coffee tables back then, and all he had to do was have a chalice and the other things. So yeah, he brought it down, and we were trying to say, so can we have that?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you say no in Latin, but he did.
Yeah.
But we're still hoping.
Yeah, but it's an interesting artifact, and he said that is purported. I mean, he doesn't have the documentary evidence, but it's been handed down that on that table.
Well, as you know, we've yet to meet with the historian who may know more about this, who was there probably longer than Father Tom. So, Mr. Schultz, if you're listening, get in touch with us.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with trying to prove the prevalence of anything. That was 210 years ago. So, and the Irish never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So that doesn't count as prevalence.
And there were 3 churches, the current church and 2 before it, and it was John Devereux and his brother Nicholas that really provided the impetus and the money for those churches.
Yeah, and a Presbyterian, I think it was Blandina Miller or somebody who donated the land too. So Yeah. They were really involved. In fact, they have two beautiful sepia tone portraits when you walk into the church. And Father Tom said that when he takes them down to clean them, that we can, avail ourselves of them and scan them and bring them here. They're not the same portraits that are the oil paintings that used to be in the Savings Bank of Utica that are now in the basement at Munson, Munson Williams.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're looking forward to that. He's been super helpful, and I'm sure once we talk to the historian, we're going to learn a lot more. For example, where was the cemetery, the Sisters of Charity, where John Devereux was buried?
Originally.
He paid for a cemetery in 1830 because the Irishmen used to be buried in just secular graves or potter's field. So he paid for a cemetery in 1830, and St. Agnes didn't happen until 1845-ish. And John Devereux died in 1848, but he wasn't buried at either place. He was buried on the grounds of St. John's, and I would love to see a picture of that.
Yeah. Do you think, Al, that it was where their parking lot is today?
I've been trying to trace it down with some of the other stuff I'm looking at. I really don't know. That's why I'd love to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
So 1848, there's not going to be any photographs, right? But one of the really cool things that happened here was the first priest here, Father Carraher, his brother, was buried on the grounds of St. Patrick's, right out there by the corner. And we were trying to find out what did it look like? There was an illustration in the Saturday Globe the night after the fire that destroyed this in 1889. And the illustration of St. Patrick's has a cross right in front of the church behind an iron fence, so we almost know exactly where he was. I'm hoping there's that kind of thing at St. John's, because that will help us solve the mystery of where on earth is John Devereux now.
Yeah. Is there any question in your mind that he's at St. Agnes?
No.
Okay.
No. Everything said he was reinterred to St. Agnes. The question is where. There's at least 5 John C. Devereux's at St. Agnes, and we think we've tracked it down, but...
Yeah, and I was over there with you on one occasion, and it's in the very old part of St. Agnes. And St. Agnes is just off of Mohawk Street between Eagle and Arthur, and the Devereux grave that we found is almost at the very north end of that cemetery. Yes.
Yeah, I don't do north-south as well as you do, but it's a wave. The most prominent John C. Devereux grave was Nicholas's son, who died in 1884. So that's when everyone thinks, because it's so beautiful. Right next to Nicholas's grave, he died in 1855. So Nicholas's whole family's here, and then right next to Nicholas's, almost like an afterthought, there's a little concrete cross that says John C. Devereux. It just looks out of place, and I'm thinking that might be our John Devereux.
Okay. Short break, right back. Al Sisti is our guest. We're talking about all things Irish. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Al Sisti is our guest. Al, very active down here where we are today at the Irish Cultural Center in West Utica. And Al, you mentioned the portraits of John Devereux and Nicholas Devereux that used to be behind the tellers at the Savings Bank of Utica. There's a reason why they had those portraits behind the tellers down there.
That's right. Among the many things they did, they started the first savings bank in Utica and the second in the United States. Irish laborers were coming through in the late 1820s, working on the canal, working on the railroads, and they didn't know who to trust. For one thing, a lot of people were working on the canal, and it was easy to get robbed or, have a couple too many beers in a saloon and end up losing your paycheck. So they needed someone they trusted, and the Devereux brothers had earned the trust of the city and its people. And so they would give their money. The Devereux would keep track of it, pay them interest, which is unheard of then, in a strong box, which is still at the M&T Bank.
John Devereux.
M&T Bank, which was the
Right.
Savings Bank of Utica.
On the Gold Dome Bank.
Correct.
The John Devereux was the first, not the first mayor of Utica, but the first elected mayor of Utica. That shows how well he was held in regard by Uticans.
Yeah, he was, before that they were appointed by Common Council or whatever. He was elected in the first public election in 1840. And it wasn't just the local respect for him. At the time in the country, the movement behind the Know Nothing Party, as they were called, was very nativistic, very anti-immigrant. But Utica didn't go along with that because they had seen how good the Devereux brothers were to people. So Utica didn't follow a national trend for a good thing.
Yeah. One of in my reading of history and writing about history, I've concentrated on John Devereux, but his brother Nicholas was quite the man in his own right.
Boy, he sure was. He came over. John Devereux came over in about 1797. Nicholas, his much younger brother, came over in 1806, where John was already established in Utica. He came over when he was 15. In fact, you wrote a great story about him. He came over with 3 shillings or whatever in his pocket.
Yeah, 3 gold coins, yeah.
Go ahead. You can tell that story better than I.
Well, I'm not going to drag it out, but he had 3 gold coins that he came with. That was it, and the clothes on his back. And the first thing he did when he got off the boat was go to church in New York City. And when the plate came around, he put one of the gold coins in the plate. And the sexton at the church thought he made a mistake and brought it to his attention. He said, "No, I meant to do that." And so I guess what they call that today, paying it forward or something. I don't know.
The Lord helps those, and all that stuff. He was quite the philanthropist and a really smart entrepreneur. He ended up, besides all the stuff he did around here, advancing the store and then starting the Globe Woolen Mills and, funding the railroads. And he bought 400,000 acres of land out west in Buffalo, started St. Bonaventure's Church, donated land and money for St. Bonaventure's Church, started a church to train clergymen in Rome, Italy, had a meeting with the Pope. Yeah, he really made a name for himself, and in a way, kind of got the short shrift because he's probably the stronger and more influential Devereux brother.
We've got a Devereux Street in Utica.
Named after him,
Yep.
not John.
Yep. And a lot of people assume it was John because John was the more public.
Yeah, Nicholas was asked to run for office, but he preferred to stay in the background and do his business.
Yeah. Speaking of business, business here at the Irish Cultural Center, you do a lot of programming down here.
We have about 2 programs a month and have all the way since the pandemic. We still had programs all the way through the pandemic, even when people couldn't come out. We did them via Zoom meetings or whatever. Mike and Chris Hoke and their program committee have done a phenomenal job. And our mission is to educate and promote Irish culture, and they're doing it.
Is he doing, or I'm trying to think of when it is, but Mike Hoke is doing a program on words?
Yeah, he's calling it Fun with the Irish Language.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be there.
He speaks Gaelic, doesn't he not?
He does, yeah. Yep.
And then
who can tell? He tells me he is.
And you had speaking of the Devereux, I want to get this in there because I think it's such a good idea. You'd like to start practice of going over to St. Agnes Cemetery on St. Patrick's Day, yes?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened during Grand Marshal Week. There's the painting of the Green Line. There's the the raising of the Irish flag. They're all good stuff, and the Irish Mass, they're all cool. But I thought it'd be really nice to pay tribute to the first Grand Marshal and the grand old man, and put shamrocks, live shamrocks, hopefully from Ireland, on his gravestone. But we didn't know where the gravestone was during my tenure. But yeah, we'd still like to do that. And we talked to someone last week who's going to see about getting us shamrocks.
Good.
I grow shamrocks at home, but they're not from Ireland. Although I'm willing to go to Ireland to pick some.
This place upstairs here at the Irish Cultural Center exists because of volunteers.
Oh, absolutely. We're a 100% volunteer organization. Yeah. It doesn't look like much here, but we've got the start of one exhibit called the Irish Pioneers of the Mohawk Valley. That's got the Devereux, Dominic Lynch, who formed Rome, Sir William Johnson, and we're getting one with Francis Kernan, also huge. We have 200 years of Irish organizations in Utica. We had a big gala for that last year. The Irish in Labor coming up, an Irish-themed art gallery coming up, and the immigrant experience, which is not quite Irish pioneers, but the everyday person, the Bridgets, the domestics, that came over, where they worked, how they worked, where they worshipped. You're
looking into something too with the late Judge Walsh.
Yeah, this talk about history can't be lost. He's written, and it was you who gave us the idea, he's written a manuscript called Irish Pioneers in Utica in the 19th Century. And it is, I read it through like Nicholas Devereux read the Bible.
It's got 17 times.
17 times. It's got so much cool stuff. The board of directors at the Utica Library finally donated one of their copies to us. So we're trying to get it published, either digitized or retyped and formatted and published.
Well, if that comes about, let me know, and we'll get you back here and we'll publicize that.
I'd be happy to read it 18 times.
All right, thanks. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget cnyhomepage.com. There's a lot of good stuff there. If you got a website here?
Yeah, the museum and the Cultural Center is ICCMV, Irish Cultural Center of the Mohawk Valley, .org.
Good. All right. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time, everybody.